Nianna, great to be with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you.
Yeah. How have you been?
I've been really good. Yeah.
Life up in Portland?
Yeah, so living in Portland, Oregon, it's been really actually quite lovely being here. Yeah, my family's all here and just settling in.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nianna, please share of your journey since the leg, really. Please fill me in and the listeners of kind of where you were at when that leg injury happened in Greece, yeah?
Yes. Well,
And then
I was in Spain.
in Spain.
Yeah, so it was about 2.5 years ago. I broke my leg severely, my ankle, and almost lost my foot. And so it was just such a long process of regaining mobility. I had 7 procedures in total, 4 major reconstructive surgeries. I was on IV antibiotic for 6 weeks. And from that, I ended up getting C. diff, which was just really like a nightmare. That's where you have like the worst kind of, it basically kills everything in your bowels except for this one bacteria, and that one bacteria just makes you go to the bathroom all the time. So I had an IV in my arm. I had this metal around my leg. I had suction for the wound so that it would heal. And I'd have to
Wow.
go to the bathroom, first thing in the morning, and I couldn't run. So
What was it called again? C. diff.
C. diff, yeah.
So is that a medication or is that a condition?
No.
What's that?
I was so my injury ended up, my first surgery ended up having an infection. So my first surgery, when I showed up to my doctor in Portland, I presented with non-union exposed hardware and a staph infection.
Oh shit.
And yeah, so it was just a bad scene. And he basically, took that metal, the internal plates, he took that out right away. And then I had to heal the soft tissue wound on the outside from the incision. So that first surgeon, the incision wound ended up getting infected. And I had a pretty severe staph infection that really threatened to kill like my bone. So my bone could have been necrotic, meaning that you can't really, you can't fix that, right? So the bone wouldn't grow back. So it was really scary. And so when I was in the hospital for the second time, he had me on an antibiotic that was like the most powerful antibiotic that exists for staph infection, and it was called vancomycin. And then, yeah, I had to have that like pumped directly to my heart for 6 weeks. And in that time, like, 2-3 months into it, it just killed everything in my system. And then I had, the C. diff is this bacteria in the body that kind of is the only one that survives, and,
Right.
it gets pretty hectic. So I couldn't even eat. I could only eat like, the brat diet, bread, rice, I think, or banana, applesauce, just very, so that was hard. It was really, really hard time. So not just the injury, and not being able to walk, but also, all the other parts that come along with it. The 3 major reconstructive surgeries required, going under with anesthesia. And so then kind of processing all that anesthesia through my system.
Which I can relate to big time on that. I've had over 25 general anesthetics. Literally lost count, but over 25 was what the hospital counted, one of the hospitals. So I can relate to that. And yeah, but pretty extreme what you went through. You literally nearly lost your leg. How close was that to, like, what was the doctor keeping you updated on that?
The thing about it too is, I live in America and I'm quite privileged. So, if I was in another place or another time and I didn't have access to the resources that I have, I would have lost my foot. I mean, that's just kind of what happens when you present with that kind of an injury and it's not taken care of. But when I got to Portland, it wasn't in good shape, and there was a lot of worry that the bone could have been infected from the from the staff, but luckily it wasn't. So I mean, the word amputation came up, and of course, when you hear that, you just like all systems get online to activate in order to save the foot. So I did have to find a limb salvage doctor. I couldn't just find like a sports orthopedic. I had to find a limb salvage, and it was a limb salvage situation. So it was taken very seriously. Yeah.
Wow. And how were you? I mean, of course, there's the mind fucked with that, the total mind fuck. But then how were you finding with all that medication and the general, like you said, and your gut, how were you like just feeling in that way and not eating much?
It was rough. It was really, really rough. It's not something I would ever, wish upon my, worst enemy or whatever. I would never wish it upon anyone. It is, it really puts you through it. But on the other hand, I did have a lot of time to sit, lay down, and think and feel and connect. And so much stuff came up. I mean, it was a really deep initiation. It was a very deep initiation into looking at myself, looking at my fears, looking at my relationships, my family, because I had to go back home where my family is. So I was very lucky that I lived on the property that my mom had, and my brother and his little daughters, my nieces, lived on the property. So they would come over and visit with me, and we would, play a lot of games and stuff, and we'd do a lot of drawing and listen to a lot of podcasts, and read a bunch of books, got into Netflix. And I also had baby goats that I would take care of every day. Like I'd hold baby goats for an hour. So it was a really wild experience, but I made it through, and it was a process. It took a lot of patience, but I think my yoga practice and my 23 years of being on the path, it gave me so many resources. So many resources that it felt like I felt like all the years of practice and all those years of having goals and accomplishing things, and having dreams, and seeing those fulfilled. It felt like all my years of practice kind of was like for that moment, for that experience, to get me through it. Because those things, my doctor has told me that I'm at the 1% of what's possible for how I presented. And so I just used all the tools I had and all the resources to really tackle this situation. Yeah.
So some of the obstacles that came your way, so there would have been the physical agony of it, for one, getting all those plates and needles and all of that changed. And what a journey that, just having the breath and the witnessing and whatever other yogic tools we can gather to journey with that. I mean, that's huge. And then the kind of for a while there anyway, letting go of the physicality of the yoga practice. You're a very physical and vibrant woman. There would have been that, I'm sure, of letting the physical practice go for a while there, right? And then what else? What are some other obstacles that you felt?
I mean, when I hear you say that, it reminds me of there was this part of the healing process where, trying to do any physical movement, it was just very triggering. I would just break down and cry, and because it was just the memory of being so vital and so strong and so capable. I mean, right before my accident, I was literally doing my favorite trail run in Mallorca. I've just run that trail, you know, for so many years. It was in super great shape. And then to have that accident happen. So there was this point, like pretty quick, like, months after the accident where, maybe I could have done exercises, maybe I could have done physical things. It was just my one ankle, but the emotional aspect of it, just, I would like go to do something and the pain in my body and the memories of the incident and the pain of the loss of my mobility, it was just too much to take. So I made the choice to say, you know what, right now, like I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to lay down and I'm actually just going to stop. And that was really, I think it was wise of me to do, because I knew that I didn't want to keep, re-traumatizing myself and pushing myself into places that I just clearly wasn't ready to go to. And so when I just stopped everything, it was like all of a sudden other parts of who I was were able to come through. I remember looking at social media and like seeing everyone being all, yeah, fitness, exercise. And I was just like, wow, it's kind of freeing right now to not have to think about exercise at all. Like to not worry about, this physical part of myself that I've done for my whole life. And to actually just look at, my self-worth beyond this physical body, beyond what I'm capable of doing. I always felt so capable of doing things. And then all of a sudden I'm not. I'm dependent. I'm needing to ask for help. I'm, very vulnerable, physically vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable. And to find that within myself is this sense of worth beyond my ability. That was very, very powerful and very, yeah, it was an important part of that journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It's huge. Ram Dass often speaks of fierce grace,
Mm.
and of course he had his stroke that nearly killed him and disabled him in a lot of ways. And at first for him, he admits like there was a real struggle, like I think a couple years of really resenting his guru, resenting Maharaji, resenting God, like having a kind of limbo period of not practicing, of going, fuck this, I was doing everything right. And like a lot of, admittedly, that victim consciousness and why me, But then when he remembered the practice and surrendered into what is, he gradually felt what he terms now fierce grace. And at first he termed it, he was thinking of the fierce grace like he got graced by, he got stroked by
Mm.
God, he got stroked by Maharaji, but then he got some flack from the community from that, and he got some flack from the Maharaji community in India, and they're like, you didn't get stroked from Maharaji. Like, this is just life. It just happens, Maharaji didn't do it. And then he kind of evolved into the next movement of fierce grace, and kind of just the old cliche of shit happens, life happens, and it's a mystery. But it is incredible how situations like that do, like there's a radiance that blossoms that wouldn't have otherwise. Like even just watching you now and watching you as you've shared your journey, even though there was a real transparency and honesty of the struggle, there was also this blossoming of a new depth of beauty and wisdom and tranquility that just doesn't happen otherwise. It's just incredible that we don't wish it upon anyone. And of course, we don't want suffering, but it keeps happening. And what a blessing to have some tools to work with it and hopefully find some wisdom out of it. And it seems like you really have blossomed through it, through witnessing your journey. Do you feel like you have?
I feel like I have. I feel like this, I remember writing in my journal or writing in, my whatever blog posts or something. and, saying, if I'm lucky, this will change me. I think that, we can go through these types of experiences, and it does harden us. It can harden us, and it can jade us, and it can, some people never get back up. That's the truth of these things. Like, some people just don't get back up. People just, um, but that just wasn't an option for me. That was not an option for me. I was just like, this is going to make me this. I'm going to have to like dig in and find the gems. But, at first I had to also go through this process of saying, okay, I'm not going to, try to find the bright side of this. And I felt like in the spiritual community, there was a lot of people like, oh, this is your karma, or this is, something like it was meant to be, or, some kind of idea about it. And
It's your root chakra.
Yeah, I just wasn't subscribing to it. I just thought to myself, like, it was really an accident. It was just really something that unfortunately happened. But I just feel that we have a choice of how we deal with what arises. Like, life is happening. Like, when, he says that Maharaji stroked him, it's like Maharaji is life, the goddess is life. It's all around us, and it's happening to us all the time. And we could try and control our environment so much, but still you're gonna, gonna get smacked down. And if you're lucky, you get dropped to your knees, and you have a chance to rise again, and be a different person, and to change. And I feel like it did soften me. It did also put me in a different perspective. I was, 38 at the time, and single, traveling the world, and I was having an amazing time, following my path as a yoga teacher, and getting on the covers of magazines, and feeling like, things were going really well. And then, this accident happened, and it just felt like, everything was just like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And, I never felt like I got where I was trying to go. And then, you realize that, like, life is, there's no, really, this is the destination. Here we are, right? And what this journey, these past, 2.5 years has done is it's made me see that as much as I do love travel, I've been traveling for, 20 years, as much as I love travel, as much as I love teaching, I started to notice that being out on the road a lot was very lonely. And the lifestyle I was living was, even though I have all these amazing friends like you and Joe and people all around the world who I love, and when I see you guys like here and there and all around, it's just so nurturing to have this global friendships and global community. But I started to realize that I really wanted a home base. This accident showed me that I want my own family. I want to have my family around. I want to have local community where I'm growing something larger than just my joys about my life,
Yeah.
And so this accident had me slow down. I'm back in Portland. All my family's here. My mom, my dad, brothers and sisters, nieces, nephew. My best friend from 18 years is here. I have a partner now, and we're, looking to have a family. And I started school. I got myself enrolled in a master's program for somatic psychology to get my license. So I'm just kind of like, my career is shifting. I'm in a big transition, and I'm still teaching. I love teaching. But I'm kind of, it feels like a good time to turn direction and to think about what's next.
That's awesome. How exciting.
Yeah. And then somatic experiencing. So I do want to mention somatic experiencing, because when I was, just started to be able to walk again, I started this 3-year practitioner program with somatic experiencing. And it's a trauma release or trauma integration technique made by Peter Levine. And that has been so profoundly helpful in the process of integrating my whole experience, the trauma, the physical injury, all the surgeries, and the loss of, what I perceived as my career, and to really let go of things that were before, and to step bravely into, an uncertain new world. So
That's great. What type of methods does that embrace for the
Yes,
trauma release, trauma integration?
it's really fascinating. It works with the nervous system.
Hmm.
So, working with these levels of activation and deactivation through the nervous system. So it's not necessarily like it is through the body. So it's not like there are touch techniques, but it's through the body. We're always tuning in to how we feel inside, and somatic is really referring to our inner felt sense, being able to listen to the wisdom of our body. And I think that's why I was able to heal so powerfully, because I'm very in tune and listening to the wisdom. I think a lot of yogis, we do that kind of as we're trained, but also we do sometimes in yoga control too much our breath and our experience. And so somatic experiencing is to really allow things to move through us without this control. Allow, like, for natural sighs, natural deep breaths, exhaling through the mouth. Um, and then we do it through a process of titration. So it's less of these explosive big releases that can be typically found in like the new age kind of tantric classes where people are having these big experiences, but really, or like the Osho stuff, which is always fun, but things that are more long lasting. So this process of developing resiliency, so feeling into the difficult memory or the difficult sensations and being there for a little bit, but then coming back to a place where you're feeling baseline. So you can, orient to the space. You can, let your heartbeat and breath settle down. And you can find that you're regulated again. And then through a session, you kind of slowly titrate into a little more activation and then back down, a little more activation and back down, so that you develop a wider resiliency for those uncomfortable feelings that we all feel that comes with trauma. And then trauma, of course, is just when we don't trust our bodies. And so if you've had a traumatic experience, usually that's related to the body. We're not just these minds, you know, detached from this physical body. And so the process of trusting the body again is a really big thing.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to look into that. Sounds really not gentle is not the word, but just balanced. I've been hearing from more and more neo-tantric practitioners of really a yearning for a more balanced approach, and even facilitators of it that have admitted I need something more balanced, so that they've been trained in this very dramatic facilitation of whatever we want to call it, prana, kundalini, bliss, shakti. But often there's that polarity of like a lot of energy, a lot of cathartic release, and then the collapse, the fall down, the tanking out, which is ever so common. The bliss is so fucking high and the vitality gets so high, which is beautiful. But like you said, bringing it back to that baseline really intelligently, rather than what's pretty common, getting ahead of ourselves because it feels so good. It sounds really balanced to keep bringing it back to that, what we could call maybe the madhya or the center or the heart. Well, there's so many different ways to bring it back to a deeper equanimity, but it's so common. I mean, the high feels so good just to keep taking it higher and higher and higher. But I keep seeing it, that frustration, the agony of from high to low. What now? So that sounds really good, and I can really feel that in you, that equanimity, that maturing. It sounds like a very you could say mature type of practice.
I think too we get habituated to stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
That habituation to those highs and lows.
Yeah.
The body will become addicted and habituated to those patterns. And so, what is it to just kind of be, like just And that took some time. And I think if you come from trauma or some developmental trauma, or if you have, those experiences in childhood of a raging father, an alcoholic mother, and if you have some of that history, you're going to be someone that's more prone to those types of therapeutic processes that you were just speaking of. And and I think that, yeah, I think that over time people can kind of tax out their adrenals from that type of processing. So I've just found this to be just very, I was able to reenact, actually, strangely enough, I reenacted my jump and the subsequent, so my jump into the sea. And then when I, got to the surface and called for help, and when this boy, he's an 18-year-old boy, like grabbed me and brought me back to the surface. And I was able to like reenact that all through just lying on my floor and doing a somatic experiencing processing in my own system. And, just remembering and going over it slowly, and remembering the touch of that boy and how it felt when I was safe in his arms. We forget, we look at our trauma as like this terrible thing that happened, but there's so many little things that happen. And there's some terrible moments, and then there's some beautiful moments. And to start to, kind of pull apart and like taffy, and start to find those points of contact in a traumatic experience, like that first time you felt safe, that first time you felt um, held, or human contact. All of that is going to bring in those good feelings, those good hormones into the body that will help counterbalance, so that I'm capable to also feel that fear, and to feel that scariness of, oh my god, I might lose my foot, or like remembering my foot hanging. Like you build resilience from those good hormones and those good sensations in that regulated nervous system, to be able to hold and contain and look at clearly the stuff that we typically don't want to look at or feel.
Mm,
Really powerful. Yeah.
very powerful. I was thinking of how many times I've injured my shoulder region, snapped both collarbones, and dislocated both shoulders countless times, mainly from surfing and in the ocean, and then it became anything and everything. And oh man, the mind is so powerful. There's been a few instances where I swear the injury has actually happened from the mind. So I've literally felt the shoulder come out from my contracting from a previous happening, if that makes sense. Like the mind is just so powerful. So to do that and revisit it and literally like rewire the nervous system in doing so, huh?
Exactly what you said. I mean, what you said in the somatic training, we talk about how people will injure the same processing required. So you might actually see about some somatic experiencing in your neighborhood. It's all over the world now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of like, one of the ways we can integrate it is to kind of to go through it, and to complete, because oftentimes what gets lodged in the body is this unresolved or incomplete process of fight or flight, trying to protect ourselves or trying to escape from the situation. So if you can kind of find ways to complete that, or to feel that sense of safety, or to feel that sense of, maybe, you do an action, it just helps you to complete the process, so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't get trapped in the tissue of the body. And so we talk about how, people who injure themselves will continue to re-injure themselves. So it's not surprising that you might have had that experience.
Yeah.
And what,
That's
what I love about this too is
yeah.
it's not looking at it, like not looking at ourselves as like we're bad, or we've done something wrong, or bad karma, or like any of this. It's just really like, wow, it's this part of my experience that I haven't fully looked at, or I haven't fully seen, in a way that my system feels complete with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's a lot like taking blame and shame out of it, because we feel a lot of shame about, our injuries. I mean, I had to really not let shame tackle me with what I had
Mm.
done to myself, and that was not easy. I mean, I had literally broke my foot off, I had literally done that to myself. And so instead of beating myself up for these past years, just been a lot of, compassion for the mistake that was made.
Mm. Huge,
Yeah.
which can be applied to so many things, even if something happens to someone else, that I mean, that can be a huge barrier of shame and blame when something happens to someone else and it's a complete accident, but we can get seduced into that trap of blame and shame, which is huge. And just to face it with compassion and really allow the nervous system to release that story. Otherwise, that story just gets thicker and thicker, and we create a whole melodrama out of something that isn't even real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'd be good to speak to people that maybe, I mean, everyone's going through their own stuff. So maybe a bit of contemplation, a bit of self reflection and wisdom to anyone that's feeling either in transition, like you've shared, like I was in the zone, I was traveling the world, I was in my A game, and then all of a sudden, like all the what we would maybe perceive as all these steps back, or dropping of a job, changing of a job, ending of a relationship. The list goes on of huge challenges that really can be really challenging to navigate. It'd be nice if you feel comfortable just to speak like directly to, kind of like you're teaching a meditation or a yoga class or somatic release, to help one just gain a bit of perspective or even just some hope to spark that next movement of their life.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Uh, what comes to mind and heart right away is, ask for help, ask for help, and then be willing to receive the help as it's showing up. Not as you'd like it to be, not as you were hoping it was going to be, not as you would even do it yourself, because it doesn't show up that way, but it shows up in the way it shows up. And that help um, can really be the difference between you moving through this transition, this difficult time, and not. So asking for help and receiving help. And don't be shy to ask for what you need. Gather your resources, call in those favors, reach out. That's it. I think that's the biggest thing.
Mhm.
You know? When we are feeling alone and a lot of fear. I mean, I was facing a lot of fear and uncertainty that can, you know, that can make us feel more isolated and alone. And we can then, feel that shame and feel that unworthiness. And then we hide or retreat. And I think that it's important to hide and retreat to a certain extent. You don't have to be out in the world like, yeah, I'm awesome, everything's fine. Hide and retreat. I totally was in my healing cave, but I'd say within your healing cave, um, you know, reach out little lifelines and extend out to people that you can trust. And if you have no one in your life, if you have no friends and no family, then get online and, there's resources out there because so many people have been through hard times and we know what it's like. I mean, now when I see somebody needing help, I'm like the first person to offer it. I am just right there, like, what do you need? Because when you need help and it's those people who offer it, you remember them forever. So that would be my biggest prayer for each person, this meditation is reach out when you if you can, and if you can't, then get resources online.
Yeah.
Just
That's that
gather resources, gather your resources.
totally. And that's really beautiful. And that's actually a struggle for me. Even when I'm really struggling to reach out for help, it's often the last move. I'll leave it until I'm just absolutely spent. There's something that, yeah, so I can relate if people resist that choice to reach out and ask for help. I don't know what it is that resists it, but it's a common one, I think.
Yeah, I was literally brought to my knees, brought
Yeah.
brought to my back. I was like face in the earth, like, you know, um, before I got that one. So, hopefully people can learn from my my life and
Mm,
ask for help, and get good at that, get really good at asking for help. Yeah,
mhm,
because we're all in this together. And what I'll have to say though, that the when I did go through that, there were so many beautiful people who were willing to help and who
mm.
were reaching out and offering, just wanting to talk and wanting to share their story, and or wanting to send me gifts in the mail, or some people sent me money, and just amazing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Super beautiful. Is there anything else you feel like sharing with our beloved listeners?
Um, yeah, so I do want to say, I don't know who all listening, but if you're
Mm.
in Portland, Oregon, I finally found a studio, a yoga studio that I'm connecting with. And because I've chosen not to travel internationally as much, I realized that I can, my body is like back to normal. I'm hiking, hours and hours. I'm doing my practice. I'm dancing. I'm really back on my body, back on my,
That's great.
and it's incredible, the progress that I made in such a kind of a short time relatively for what happened. Um, but it was a choice that I've made to say, okay, I want to stay in Portland and I want to build, community here. So I finally found a studio that I resonated with. It's called Yoga Boga, and they have 2 spaces, and I'll be starting to teach classes there. In
Great.
December. Yeah, so that's going to be really sweet. And so if you're in Portland, definitely Portland, Oregon, or if you're not and you're have friends here, send them my way. Love to meet them. And and I would definitely say check out Somatic Experiencing if you're thinking about that. Anyone who's listening, Somatic Experiencing is um, a beautiful offering.
Wonderful. And where can people keep in touch with you? Via Instagram and your website? Is that best?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
am on Instagram, Nianna Bray. I think Nianna Roseberry on
Yeah.
Instagram, and then niannabray.com is my website. I will be in LA in December for the last full moon of the decade. I'll be doing a week, a 3-day during the week intensive. So if anyone wants to see me there in LA, but yeah, I think
Great. Well, it's been so beautiful to connect. Really inspiring watching your journey unfold and where you're taking life.
yeah, we just have to let life take us, right?
Yes, true.
Yeah. Well, nice to see you and
Yeah, good to see
all
you, Nianna. Yeah, much
of
love.
much love.